My name is Juliet Stipeche, and I'm the Executive Director of Workforce Solutions Gulf Coast, which is the largest of the 28 workforce boards across the state of Texas. We're here today to talk about how we use labor market data to guide workforce investments, helping employers find skilled workers and connecting people to lasting careers. Workforce development isn't just about filling jobs, it's about making sure a region has the talent it needs to stay competitive and grow. Today, I'm talking to our economist, Parker Harvey, who analyzes labor market data to help the board understand hiring trends, skills gaps, and where our workforce investments can have the greatest impact. His analysis helps us make sense of where the jobs are, what skills are in demand, and how workforce planning connects to the bigger economic picture. The High Skills, High Growth Occupation List is one of the ways we focus on the jobs that matter most for long-term growth. Parker, from your perspective, how does this list shape our workforce priorities?
Thanks, Juliet. You're right. The High Skill, High Growth list is a priority of ours, but it's not developed in isolation. It's built on our targeted industries list, which identifies 51 industries driving our region's economy. Now, before we talk about these lists in more detail, it's important to understand how we approach workforce investments. We work directly with the businesses to help them train workers, upskill their existing employees, and plan for future labor needs. Now, in a region with 3.5 million jobs, 150,000 employers, that is a big task. So we have to be strategic about where we invest. Our goal is to make sure our workforce investments directly support the industries that need skilled workers the most. If we get this right, businesses have access to the talent they need, and workers have sustainable career paths. Now, one of the most important aspects of this process is what we call labor market alignment. Now, we start by identifying key industries, whether that's healthcare, manufacturing, industry, or tech, and then we pinpoint the occupations within those industries that are essential to their growth. So, for example, in healthcare, we're not just looking at doctors and nurses. We're also examining the demand for medical technologists, diagnostic imaging specialists, and even IT roles that support hospital operations. Same goes for energy, where we see a growing need for engineers, project managers, skilled trades that support infrastructure and renewables.
So that's a critical point. Focusing on occupations within targeted industries helps make sure workforce investments lead to long-term careers and not just short-term jobs. And it's about meeting today's needs while also preparing for what's ahead.
Yeah, that balance is exactly why the criteria we use to determine these occupations are so important. Not every job that we have makes the list, even if it is growing. For an occupation to qualify, at least half the jobs in that field need to be in our targeted industries. And that tells us that businesses rely on those occupations for a lot of their growth. And it has to be large enough with around 1,700 jobs projected for the year 2032 so that we know there's room for new workers. It must have an above average growth rate, meaning it's expanding faster than the regional job market. And it has to require some sort of post-secondary education or specialized training, whether that's a certification, an apprenticeship, or a degree. Now, wages also need to be around about $22 an hour so that workers can earn a stable income. One of the things to understand is that occupations don't stand alone. They exist within industries, and our goal is to align training investments with the industries driving our region's economy. That's why we start by identifying targeted industries first, looking at job numbers, wages, and economic impact before selecting occupations that are critical to those industries. So, for example, software developers are a high-skill, high-growth occupation, but they wouldn't make our list if they weren't employed in our targeted industries in high concentrations. The same applies to emerging roles in green energy or, let's say, data analytics. Growth alone isn't enough. It has to align with the broader economic framework. Now, this approach, what it does is it ensures that when we invest in workforce training, we're supporting individual careers and the long-term competitiveness of entire sectors. And this is especially true for small and medium-sized businesses. Large employers may have dedicated workforce planning teams, but smaller businesses often don't have that capacity. Many of them are so focused on daily operations that they don't always have time to think about long-term hiring and training needs. So Workforce Solutions Gulf Coast, what we do is we help by providing labor market insights and making it easier for employers to access training resources without taking on all the costs and planning themselves.
So as we think about aligning our workforce strategy with economic growth, understanding where high skills, high growth occupations fit is crucial. So Parker, can you walk us through how we make sure this list reflects the current labor market and where the market is headed?
That's a great question. So the list is updated every 2 years using the latest labor market data, employer feedback, and economic trends. So we look at things like job size, projected growth, education requirements, and of course, wages. But most importantly, we engage with employers directly because if businesses don't tell us what they need, we risk training for jobs that won't exist in 5 years.
So smaller businesses might not be able to train workers the way larger companies do, but they still need people with the right skills. If training is expensive or hard to access, it's harder for them to compete for talent, especially in fields where those skills are in high demand.
Absolutely. Ideally, employers would come to us early on telling us exactly what skills they need and even identifying training programs at community colleges and other post-secondary institutions that could help. Now, in that scenario, we could help connect workers to training and even offset some of the costs. In reality, though, that kind of engagement that I just described doesn't happen consistently. So we have to rely on labor market data to guide our investments. That's why having a structured, data-driven approach is absolutely essential. And the other thing is that we're dealing with a massive labor market, over 600 different occupations across 3.5 million jobs, over 300 industries. And that's why it's critical to have a system in place that helps us narrow the focus to the most impactful careers, rather than just spreading workforce investments across the board without any real clear direction.
So one of the ongoing challenges we face is balancing immediate workforce demands with long-term economic growth. And as we refine the high skills, high growth list, how do we make sure it remains relevant and adaptive to changes in industry needs?
That's where employer input is essential. So some of the fastest growing occupations, like roles in advanced manufacturing and tech-driven logistics, those just simply didn't exist a decade ago the way they do now. Now, working with employers helps ensure that the list reflects real hiring challenges and future skilled needs, not just historical trends. So, for example, industries like electric vehicle production and semiconductor manufacturing are scaling up rapidly. It's imperative training programs keep up with changing skill needs.
So we've talked about how we identify high skills, high growth occupation and why it matters. And looking ahead, what shifts do you anticipate in the next few years that workforce and economic development employers should be preparing for now?
Well, one of the biggest shifts will be the acceleration of clean energy jobs, advanced logistics roles, and the digitalization of traditional industries. Also, of course, AI and automation will create new challenges and obviously a lot of new opportunities for businesses to rethink workforce training strategies. Now, this data-driven approach is particularly valuable for small and mid-sized businesses. Unlike large companies, they may not have access to in-depth labor market research, the kind that we provide, so they rely on regional workforce data to guide their hiring strategies. Now, other thing about this too is that if businesses want to stay competitive, they need to start investing in workforce training now, rather than waiting until shortages become a crisis. Juliet, let's switch tables. We've been working on the strategic plan for quite a while now. What would you say about the strategic plan that would be of interest to our more rural counties, perhaps?
So, first and foremost, the Gulf Coast Workforce Board spent a considerable amount of time receiving information from community members, from chambers, economic development organizations, community benefit organizations, and government entities, as well as our employees from all over the 13 county areas. So it's a plan that's designed to understand and facilitate better connections for a workforce system with our entire community. And so we're really super appreciative of everybody that has participated in it. And we now have 4 goals. 1, connecting more technology and innovation to our system. 2, serving as a regional convener and developing strategic partnerships. Also making sure that we always have business forward focused strategies and helping our community. And also making sure that people are aware of what we have with better outreach and communication. So we are helping develop a plan that is focused on each county in our region in a more meaningful, intentional way.
Excellent. People might also be aware that there's a local plan that we're required to submit to the Texas Workforce Commission every couple of years. How does that relate to the strategic plan?
So the great thing, I tell folks, the local Workforce Investment Opportunity Act plan is submitted to the state, but it allows us to operationalize the activities that are contained in our strategic plan. And so we're developing this alignment, ensuring that we're able to focus the utilization of these federal funds in the most strategic manner possible to empower both our employers and residents with a chance to succeed in this dynamic economy.
Absolutely. One thing I feel that viewers should probably be aware of is that the high skill, high growth list and our targeted industries are an integral part of the local plan.
Absolutely.
In fact, we're required to include that as part of the plan to be able to signal to the state as well as the federal government what our priorities are in terms of investment in local industries and careers.
So can you tell us a little bit more about how do our offices use this high skills, high growth to connect people in the community to the various types of training opportunities that are in need?
Absolutely. Our career offices, particularly our career counselors, use the list when they're talking with customers to help them determine what career path might be appropriate for them, along with what kinds of training opportunities are in the region that might be relevant to those careers. For our employer engagement contractor, we use our targeted industries list in order to help them prioritize which kinds of companies they reach out to.
So employers shouldn't wait for challenges to arise. They need to plan for what's coming down the road. And that's why we're working directly with businesses to identify their workforce needs and make those targeted investments in training. The goal is a talent pipeline that keeps the regional economy strong and gives workers real opportunities to succeed. So thanks, Parker, for walking us through the data and explaining what it means for employers. So the labor market is always shifting, and the data helps us understand where it's headed. We'll keep tracking the numbers, analyzing what they're telling us, and sharing this information with the community.